Welcome back to another episode of the Robert Judat podcast. Tonight we are exploring the cozy art of slow living.
So if you look at the data on heterosexual couples, men climax in partnered intimacy about 85 to 95% of the time.
Right.
But women, it's only about 60 to 70% of the time.
Yeah, that gap is just massive.
It really is. And for decades, society has essentially treated this as, a biological reality. We've just kind of assumed it's the way we're built.
Like it's inevitable.
Exactly. But what if I told you that the data on lesbian couples completely proves the biology is fine, and that the real issue behind this huge gap is actually a deeply broken cultural script?
And that right there is the core premise of our deep dive today. We're looking at a stack of sources that explore conscious intimacy, presence, and the reality of this so-called orgasm gap.
Which is such a huge topic for us to unpack.
It is. And right up front, I think it's important to state that the material we're unpacking today, for you listening, it isn't about pointing fingers.
Right, no blame game here.
Exactly. It's not a battle of the sexes.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally about understanding how our cultural conditioning, sets both partners up to fail, and how shifting from this mindset of performance to a state of presence changes the entire dynamic.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because the data in these sources is just jarring, but it's also incredibly illuminating.
Oh, absolutely.
Because to figure out how to close this gap, we first have to look at what the research actually tells us, and more importantly, what it completely disproves.
Right, the myths it busts.
Yeah. The sources reference decades of demographic research, and I think the most striking takeaway is just how stubborn this 60 to 70% number is for heterosexual women.
It is remarkably static. I mean, the sources emphasize that this gap persists across literally all age groups and cultural backgrounds.
Which is wild.
It really is, because you might assume that as couples get older or as they stay together longer, the gap would naturally just close on its own.
Like you'd figure it out over time.
Exactly. But the data shows it persists regardless of relationship length. Like, a couple could be together for 2 months or 20 years, and statistically, that gap remains largely unchanged in the heterosexual demographic.
Which makes sense why people naturally fall back on the assumption that women's bodies are just, inherently more complicated.
Right, the whole women are a mystery trope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We treat it like a hardware issue. Like the cultural narrative tells us the machinery is just glitchy or really difficult to operate. But the sources highlight this specific piece of demographic data that just shatters that myth entirely. And that's that lesbian women report significantly higher orgasm rates.
Yes, that's the key.
In fact, their rates routinely match and often even exceed those of heterosexual men.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that single data point really changes the entire conversation.
It really does.
Because it proves definitively that female biology is not the limiting factor here. I mean, the hardware works perfectly.
Okay, so if the hardware is fully functional, it means we are actively teaching people the wrong way to use it.
Basically, yes.
It's like we are running a completely incompatible operating system. So where exactly are we downloading this bad code from? What is this specific cultural conditioning that's failing us so spectacularly?
Well, the sources refer to it as the porn-influenced script.
Okay.
And it's crucial to understand that individuals often don't even realize they're defaulting to it. This script is heavily conditioned by broader media and, just cultural osmosis.
Right, it's just in the water.
Exactly. It's remarkably rushed. It is inherently penetration first, and it is intensely goal-oriented.
Yeah, the sources point out that this script basically treats intimacy like a race to a finish line. It relies heavily on visual stimulation and physical friction with, very minimal clitoral engagement. And it just completely bypasses the need for any kind of emotional attunement.
And the toll this takes on women is profound. I mean, because of this heavily ingrained sequence, women in these studies frequently report feeling unwarmed and unseen. Oh, wow. Unwarmed. That's a powerful word for it.
It really is. The pacing is entirely dictated by this rapid arousal curve that simply doesn't match their own biological rhythm. So they're being pulled along a track at a speed that literally forces them to disconnect from their own bodies.
But I have to stop you there because I know someone listening to this right now is hearing the phrase cultural conditioning and maybe rolling their eyes a bit.
Sure, that's a fair reaction.
Right. Like, isn't this just a basic failure to communicate? If a couple isn't talking in the bedroom, if you don't tell your partner what you like or that the pacing is off, obviously there's going to be a gap.
Yeah.
So why are the sources labeling this massive cultural failure instead of just, a communication breakdown between two people?
Well, this raises a really important question. And you're right, it's a very common reaction. Communication is obviously vital,
Right.
but you cannot effectively communicate your way out of a script if you don't even realize you are running one.
Oh, that's a great point. The sources argue this is a cultural failure because the performance script is so deeply embedded in our implicit understanding of what sex is quote unquote supposed to look like.
Right.
A man isn't consciously trying to rush his partner. He genuinely believes this is what success looks like. And a woman isn't consciously choosing to disconnect. She often just assumes something is wrong with her because the cultural narrative says the script should be working.
Wow. And the sources are actually very clear that men are not the villains in this narrative either.
Not at all.
They're mutual casualties. I mean, men are handed the exact same faulty software, and it basically traps them in this state of constant performance anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. They become terrified of doing it wrong. The cultural script dictates that their worth as a partner is tied to, getting the job done.
Right.
And usually doing it through penetration, which the script treats as the main event. So this forces their focus entirely onto their own performance, which makes them completely disconnected from their partner's actual real-time feedback.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think, because the sources dig into the actual biology of why this performance anxiety ruins the experience for literally everyone.
Yes, the biology is fascinating.
When a man is focused on performing, he's essentially stressed. And anxiety produces cortisol. Cortisol triggers the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, or perform mode. And biologically, when you're in a sympathetic state, your body literally routes blood flow away from the reproductive organs and toward the extremities for survival.
That is the exact biological mechanism at play. The male cultural script treats arousal like a light switch. You just flick it on and the machinery should start working.
Right.
But the female nervous system, as detailed in these texts, just does not operate on a switch.
Right. The sources suggest it's much more like a thermostat.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, like you can't just flip a switch and expect the room to be hot. The thermostat requires the ambient temperature of the room to warm up gradually before the furnace actually kicks on. And the ambient temperature in this case is emotional safety.
That is such an excellent way to frame it. Because emotional safety isn't just some abstract, poetic concept in these sources.
Right. It's not just a nice idea.
Exactly. It is a literal biological prerequisite. For the female arousal curve to activate fully, the autonomic nervous system must undergo a measurable shift.
Okay.
It has to transition out of that sympathetic, guarded state and drop into the parasympathetic state.
The rest, digest, and connect mode.
Exactly. When a woman feels emotionally safe, when she feels seen, and when the pacing allows her to actually inhabit her body, that parasympathetic shift occurs.
Yeah.
The muscles relax, the blood flow changes, and that biological shift is the precise foundation where physical arousal and pleasure can actually expand.
So the cultural script fails because it attempts to just completely bypass the nervous system.
100%.
So if the current cultural script, this rushed, light switch, performance-based software is keeping everyone trapped in a stressed, sympathetic state, how do we rewrite it?
Well, that's the big question.
Yeah. And the source material offers a highly specific framework for this, which is rooted in modern, secular tantric principles.
And the paradigm shift they propose here is really profound because it requires moving entirely away from technique.
Right.
We're so culturally obsessed with finding the right move or, the right button to push to fix the gap. But these secular tantric principles are about focusing entirely on state over technique.
Which makes sense. The texts outline core principles for shifting this state. And it involves drastically slowing down, using synchronized breath and eye contact to establish genuine presence. It means prioritizing full-body touch rather than just zeroing in on the genitals immediately.
Yeah, that full-body connection is key.
And the texts emphasize clitoral-centered pleasure, and they introduce this concept called yoni-centered awareness.
Right, and I think we need to unpack that term practically because it can sound a bit esoteric to some people.
Oh, definitely.
Yoni-centered awareness in this context isn't about mysticism, it's a psychological shift. It means shifting your focus away from purely external, goal-driven friction and instead acknowledging the internal responsive nature of female anatomy.
Right.
It means honoring the space as something deeply personal and emotionally connected, rather than treating it as a mechanical finish line to cross.
It's like, well, it's almost like trying to force a flower to bloom by just pulling its petals apart,
Oh, wow, yes.
right? That's technique, that's goal-oriented, versus just providing the right soil, the right water, and sunlight so it opens naturally, which is creating that nervous system safety and presence. It's the difference between trying to conquer a space
Yeah.
and trying to cultivate an environment.
That is a perfect analogy, and it really validates the profound realization that emotional safety is the literal foundation of physical arousal. Our culture teaches us that connection is the reward at the end of the physical performance. But this paradigm flips that completely. It argues that deep emotional connection must be established first, because that connection is the only thing that drops the thermostat into the parasympathetic state.
Which brings us to how we actually apply this. Because the sources provide some incredible, anonymized insights from women in therapeutic and clinical settings.
Yeah, these quotes are really eye-opening.
They are. These are real voices explaining what this nervous system disconnect actually feels like on the ground.
And the themes are remarkably consistent across the board. The most frequent sentiment women express in these studies is simply, I need more time to arrive.
I need more time to arrive.
Right. They describe feeling like a prop in a movie or feeling physically touched but completely emotionally abandoned.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. They are explicitly stating that they require far more warming, softening, and emotional presence before physical intensity is even on the table.
They want to be attended to, not rushed. And they emphasize that their pleasure is full body. It's not localized. It needs to feel like a shared, expansive experience. And above all else, the consistent theme across these anonymized reports is that presence is everything.
Absolutely everything. You cannot fake presence.
Right.
The nervous system knows immediately when a partner is performing rather than connecting.
So let's talk about the practical blueprint the sources provide, specifically for men who might be listening, who are realizing they've been running this bad code and, feeling the weight of that performance anxiety.
Yeah.
The guidance here is actually incredibly liberating. It takes the pressure of putting on a flawless show entirely off their shoulders.
It does. The first rule the sources offer is simply, if you think you're going slow, go slower.
Go slower.
Exactly. Shift your attention away from what you're trying to achieve and redirect it entirely to your physical and emotional presence in the room. Understand the fundamental anatomy, that the vast majority of female pleasure is clitoral-based, not penetration-based.
Right.
Ask questions. Check in with your partner. As the texts point out, curiosity is confidence.
Curiosity is confidence.
Yeah.
I love that. And the sources explicitly note that adopting this mindset doesn't make men better performers. It makes them better partners.
Yes.
But I want to ask directly on behalf of the listener. For the person listening to this right now who feels a bit intimidated or realizes they've been stuck in performance mode for years, what is the literal first step they can take tonight to shift into presence?
That's a great question. The sources suggest something very concrete for that first step. You have to drop the agenda.
Drop the agenda. Okay.
Yeah. Dropping the agenda means walking into the space of intimacy without a finish line in mind. It means temporarily removing the goal of climax entirely from the table.
Wow, that's a huge shift.
It is, but when you take the pressure off the outcome, you naturally drop into the present moment. You begin to notice the pacing of breath, you notice the rhythm of touch, you notice the energetic exchange that is happening right now, rather than just rushing toward what happens next. You give the profound gift of time. Dropping the agenda is what allows both partners' nervous systems to finally exhale and shift into that parasympathetic state.
That is such a vital reframing. And the sources also have a very clear finding regarding how women view their own role in this dynamic.
Yes, they do.
The texts note that for a shift to occur, women have to internalize a crucial realization themselves. And that is that pleasure is not a luxury.
Right.
It isn't secondary, and it isn't something to apologize for or minimize or rush through just to accommodate a partner's arousal curve.
The sources really frame this as an essential reconditioning of the female software, too.
Yeah.
It requires moving away from a mindset of just getting it done to please someone else and moving into a mindset of demanding the space and time necessary to actually inhabit their own body. It's treating their own body as sacred.
So what does this all mean when we pull it together? The journey we've taken through these sources today really reveals that the orgasm gap is not a biological destiny.
Oh, not at all.
It's the direct product of a rushed, performance-based cultural script that leaves men anxious and leaves women biologically disconnected. But by uninstalling that goal-oriented code and replacing it with profound presence, emotional safety, and an understanding of the nervous system, intimacy stops being a race. It transforms into an expansive, deeply shared experience.
You know, if we look at this not just as an issue of intimacy, but as a mirror for our culture, it raises an important point.
Oh,
The sources we've discussed highlight how deeply we've been conditioned to prioritize the outcome over the experience.
right.
So if our broader culture is so obsessively focused on productivity, on efficiency, and on constantly hacking our way to the finish line, is the orgasm gap just a symptom of a society that has completely forgotten how to simply be present in every other aspect of our lives, too?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy thought. For you, the listener, we invite you to really mull that over. Consider how often the pressure to perform bleeds into the moments where you are supposed to be connecting. Because you deserve a connection that feels safe, unhurried, and deeply honoring of your own rhythm. Think about what you personally need to feel truly grounded in your own body without the looming pressure of a finish line.
Exactly.
Because it turns out, we don't need to force the lock with the wrong key. We don't need to fix the hardware. We just need to stop rushing, let the temperature in the room naturally rise, and realize that true connection opens up on its own when we simply take the time to be present.